Prince Kale Thresh stood in the shadows of the Golden Throne Hall, watching his father address the Galactic Council. The Dragon King's voice boomed across the vast chamber, each word carrying the weight of absolute authority. Massive holographic displays showed star maps, trade routes, and military positions across 17 solar systems. Representatives from dozens of species hung on every syllable. But Kale Thresh heard nothing. Born without the ability to hear or speak, the prince had learned to read the galaxy through movement, expression, and the subtle dance of body language. He watched his father's scaled hands gesture toward the Terran delegation, saw the way the human ambassador's shoulders tensed, noticed how the Zephyrian trade minister's tentacles curled inward with concern. Something important was happening. Something about humanity. The prince had always been fascinated by humans. Unlike other species that bowed immediately before draconian might, humans maintained a stubborn dignity even in submission. Their ambassador, Admiral Sarah Chen, stood straight-backed, despite being surrounded by beings who could tear her ship apart with their bare claws. After the session ended, Kale Thresh retreated to his usual haunt, Stella's Diner, a small establishment in the station's lower levels that catered to off-duty workers and travelers. The owner, Marcus Webb, had always treated him like any other customer rather than unwanted royalty. But it was Marcus's daughter, Elena, who truly understood him. Elena Webb was 23. With auburn hair she kept in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to see everything. She had learned galactic sign language to communicate with the various species that frequented the diner, but she had also taken the time to learn the specific gestural dialect used in the dragon courts. As Kale Thresh slid into his usual booth in the corner, Elena approached with a warm smile. Her hands moved gracefully as she signed, "Rough day at the palace?" Kale Thresh's scaled features softened. In a galaxy where most beings either ignored him or spoke slowly and loudly, as if volume could somehow bridge the communication gap, Elena's fluent signing felt like coming home. Father was making announcements about humanity. The council seemed troubled. Elena's expression grew serious. She glanced around the nearly empty diner before sliding into the seat across from him. "What kind of announcements?" I could not fully understand from reading lips and gestures alone, but the human ambassador looked as though she had received very bad news. Kale Thresh's hands moved with the practiced elegance of someone who had relied on them for communication his entire life. There was discussion of mining rights, territorial boundaries. Your people seemed to be losing something important. Elena's jaw tightened. She had grown up on Terra Nova, one of humanity's first successful colony worlds, before her family moved to the Dragon Station for her father's work. The loss of human territory was personal to her in ways that few beings in this cosmopolitan station could understand. "May I ask you something?" Elena signed, her movements careful and deliberate. Kale Thresh nodded. "Why do you care what happens to humanity?" "Your father rules 17 systems. Humans are just another subject species." The prince was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes studying her face. "Because," he finally signed, "humans are the only species I have met who understand what it means to be underestimated." Elena felt something shift in her chest at those words. She had seen how the Dragon Court treated the prince, like an embarrassment to be hidden away, a weakness in the bloodline of apex predators. But she had also seen his intelligence, his careful observation of everything around him, the way he noticed details that others missed. "The waitress job," she signed suddenly. "It's not really about the money, is it?" Kale Thresh tilted his head in curiosity. "You come here because it's the only place where someone talks to you like you're a person instead of a problem." The accuracy of her observation hit him like a physical blow. For all his royal education, all the tutors who had tried to teach him to read lips and communicate through writing, none of them had ever simply learned to sign with him. They had all been focused on fixing what they saw as a defect rather than adapting to who he actually was. "Your father is planning something," Elena continued, her signing more urgent now. "Something that will hurt my people. I can see it in how the staff have been acting, the way security has increased, the closed-door meetings." Kale Thresh leaned forward. "What do you need to know?" The question was simple, but it carried enormous weight. A prince of the Dragon Empire was offering to spy against his own father for the sake of a human waitress and her people. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she signed, "Everything. We need to know everything." That night, Kale Thresh made his way through the palace's service corridors, paths he had memorized during countless lonely childhood explorations. Being ignored had its advantages. The guards barely glanced at him, and the court officials were too busy with their own affairs to notice where the defective prince wandered. He found what he was looking for in his father's private study: detailed military assessments of human colonies, resource surveys, and something that made his blood run cold: deployment orders for the Dragon Fleet's 5th Battle Group. The documents were written in High Draconian, a formal script that many species couldn't read. But Kale Thresh had been educated in all the classical languages of the Empire. As he photographed page after page with a small device, the scope of his father's plan became clear. Humanity's 3 most prosperous colonies were about to be seized under the pretext of administrative reorganization. The human populations would be relocated to designated settlements, while dragon corporations moved in to strip mine the worlds for rare elements needed for faster-than-light drives. It was legalized theft on a massive scale, and it would leave humanity scattered and economically crippled. The next day, Elena noticed immediately that something had changed. Kale Thresh's usual composed demeanor was cracked, his signing sharp with barely controlled anger. "I have information," he signed as soon as she approached his table. "But once I share it, there will be no going back, for either of us." Elena set down her order pad and looked directly into his golden eyes. "My people deserve to know what's coming." Kale Thresh transferred the copied files to a small data crystal, his movements careful and deliberate. "These are deployment orders and resource surveys. Your colonies of Terra Nova, New Geneva, and Armstrong's World are going to be seized within the month. The populations will be moved to what the documents call cultural preservation zones, essentially reservations." Elena's face went pale as she absorbed the information. How many people? 47 million across the 3 worlds. The number hit her like a physical blow. She thought of her childhood friends still living on Terra Nova, the families who had built lives on worlds they thought were theirs to keep. "There's more," Kale Thresh continued. "The orders include contingency plans for dealing with resistance. Your people's ships are outgunned, but the Dragon Fleet is not expecting significant opposition because they believe humans lack the will to fight against overwhelming odds." A smile began to form on Elena's lips, though it held no warmth. "They really don't understand us at all, do they?" "What do you mean?" "Humans have a saying," Elena signed. "We don't go gentle into that good night. When someone tries to take everything from us, we have a tendency to make them regret it." That evening, Elena sent an encrypted message through channels her father had established during his years as a merchant sailor. Within hours, the information was racing through the human colonial network, reaching resistance cells, merchant captains, and the scattered remnants of Earth's old military who had never quite accepted humanity's subjugation. Meanwhile, Kale Thresh returned to his father's study. This time, he wasn't there to steal information. He was there to plant it. The device Elena had given him was a quantum transmitter, barely larger than a grain of sand. Attached to the underside of his father's desk, it would relay real-time information about Dragon military communications to human intelligence networks. As he worked in the darkness, Kyle Thresh reflected on how his life had changed in the span of a few days. For 25 years, he had been the Dragon King's disappointment, the weak link in a dynasty built on strength and dominance. Now he was actively working against everything his family represented. But as he thought of Elena's fierce determination, of the dignity he had seen in human faces even in defeat, he knew he had made the right choice. The war that was coming would reshape the galaxy. And for the first time in his life, the Dragon King's quiet son would have a voice that mattered. The attack on Terra Nova came exactly when Kale Thresh had predicted, but not how anyone expected. Admiral Chen had used the intelligence to evacuate the civilian population to hidden bases in asteroid fields and dead systems. When the Dragon Fleet's 5th battle group arrived expecting to find 47 million helpless humans, they instead found empty cities and a surprise waiting in orbit. Elena watched the battle reports stream in from her father's diner, now serving as an impromptu resistance communications hub. The human fleet that met the Dragons consisted of converted cargo haulers, mining ships fitted with military-grade weapons, and a handful of ancient Earth Navy vessels that had been secretly maintained by colonial militias. On paper, it should have been a massacre. Dragon battleships were technological marvels, armed with plasma cannons that could crack planets and shields that could deflect asteroid impacts. But humans had spent generations learning to make do with less, to improvise, to turn disadvantage into opportunity. "Look at this," Marcus Webb said, pointing to a tactical display. "The mining ships are using their ore processing beams as weapons. They're literally melting through dragon armor." Elena's hands moved in excited signs as she relayed the information to Kale Thresh, who had become a fixture in the diner's back room. The Dragon commanders are completely confused. They were prepared for a standard colonial suppression, not actual military resistance. Kale Thresh studied the data streams flowing through the quantum transmitter he had planted. His expression was grim as he signed back. "My father is furious. He's ordering the deployment of the 3rd and 7th battle groups. This was supposed to be a simple occupation, but now he's treating it as a full rebellion." The prince paused, his golden eyes reflecting the glow of the display screens. "Elena, you need to understand something. When my father commits this level of military force, he doesn't intend to leave survivors. The orders I'm intercepting, they're not about conquest anymore. They're about extermination." Elena felt ice form in her stomach, but her resolve only hardened. "Then we'd better make sure he fails." Over the following weeks, the small diner became the center of an intelligence network that spanned multiple star systems. Elena coordinated with resistance cells, while her father used his merchant contacts to smuggle weapons and supplies to human forces. But it was Kale Thresh who provided the crucial advantage: real-time access to Dragon military communications. The prince had discovered something even more valuable than troop movements and fleet positions. Dragon military culture was built on rigid hierarchy and traditional tactics. Their commanders were brilliant at coordinating massive fleet actions, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to play by established rules. "They keep expecting humans to retreat to defensive positions," Kale Thresh signed during one of their planning sessions. "But your people keep attacking where they're not expected, using weapons they don't recognize, employing strategies that don't appear in any military database." Elena smiled. "Humans are very good at making things up as we go along." But she also knew that improvisation alone wouldn't be enough. The Dragon Empire controlled thousands of ships, millions of troops, and industrial capacity that dwarfed anything humanity could muster. They needed something more than clever tactics. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Kim had been a xenoarchaeologist before the war, studying the ruins of civilizations that predated both humanity and the Dragon Empire. She had been trapped on Terra Nova during the evacuation and had spent the past month hiding in ancient underground complexes that her research teams had discovered years earlier. Her transmission reached them through a borrowed mining ship's communication array. "I've found something you need to see." The footage she sent showed chambers carved into bedrock, filled with technology that neither human nor dragon science could fully explain. But most importantly, it showed weapons, devices that could generate fields of force capable of disabling dragon shields and overloading their plasma-based power systems. "The ancients," Elena breathed as she watched the images. "You found actual ancient technology?" Dr. Kim's voice crackled through the transmission. "Not just technology, I found their historical records. The Dragon Empire isn't the first to try conquest on this scale. The ancients faced something similar 12,000 years ago." Elena quickly signed the information to Kale Thresh, whose reaction was immediate and intense. His hands moved in rapid, agitated gestures. The historical records in the Dragon Archives mention the Great Silence, a period when several advanced civilizations simply vanished from the galaxy. Father always claimed it proved that only the strongest survive. But if the ancients had weapons capable of defeating enemies like the Dragon Empire, then they chose to disappear rather than become conquerors themselves, Elena finished. The implications were staggering. Humanity had stumbled upon the remnants of a civilization that had possessed the power to dominate the galaxy, but had chosen restraint instead. And they had left their weapons behind, hidden on worlds throughout human space. Within days, archaeological teams were being deployed to excavation sites across human colonies. What they found confirmed Dr. Kim's discoveries: underground vaults containing ancient technology, along with databases explaining how to activate and maintain the devices. But the weapons came with a warning, inscribed in the universal mathematical language that all spacefaring civilizations could read. "Power used for domination becomes a poison that destroys both the wielder and the victim. Use these tools only to preserve life, never to take it." Elena found herself at the center of heated debates among human resistance leaders. Some wanted to use the ancient weapons to devastate dragon worlds, to make the Empire pay for generations of oppression. Others argued for a more limited approach, using the technology only for defense. It was Kale Thresh who helped her see the path forward. "In all my life studying dragon military doctrine," he signed during one of their late-night planning sessions, "I have learned that my people respect only strength. But there are different kinds of strength. The strength to destroy, and the strength to show mercy when you could destroy." Elena understood. "You're saying we need to win so decisively that your father has no choice but to respect us, but we also need to show that we won't use our victory to become like him." Exactly. Humans have always been different from other species in the Empire. You maintain hope when others would despair. You show kindness when others would show cruelty. Don't let this war change that. The final phase of the plan took shape over the following week. Human forces would use ancient technology to disable the dragon fleets without destroying them. They would demonstrate humanity's new capabilities while simultaneously showing restraint that no previous enemy had ever displayed. But first, they had to deal with a more immediate problem. Dragon intelligence had finally traced the source of the intelligence leaks to the station where Elena and Kale Thresh were working. A full security battalion was on its way, led by General Thrakvor, the Dragon King's most ruthless enforcer. "You need to leave," Elena signed urgently as they received word of the approaching forces. "If they find you here, they will execute me for treason." Kale Thresh finished calmly. "I have known this was possible from the beginning. But you'll come with us, right? You can't go back to your father now." The prince was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Elena, I need you to understand something. I am not human. I will never be human. If I come with you, I will always be the dragon prince who betrayed his own species. Your people will never fully trust me." Elena's hands moved frantically. That's not true. Look at what we've accomplished together. Look at what you've sacrificed. What I have sacrificed, Kale Thresh signed slowly. I have sacrificed gladly, because for the first time in my life, I have been part of something that matters more than my own comfort. The sound of approaching boots echoed through the station's corridors. Elena grabbed a data crystal containing the final set of ancient weapon locations and pressed it into Kale Thresh's hands. Take this to the human fleet. Tell them everything we've learned. What about you? Elena's smile was fierce. I'm going to buy you time. She kissed him then, quickly and fiercely, before pushing him toward the service tunnels that led to the docking bays. As Kale Thresh disappeared into the shadows, Elena turned to face the dragon security forces who would soon break down the diner's doors. Marcus Webb stood beside his daughter, a plasma rifle in his hands and determination in his eyes. Just like your mother, he said softly. Never could resist a fight worth fighting. The last thing Kale Thresh heard before the tunnel sealed behind him was the sound of energy weapons firing and Elena's voice shouting defiance in a language the dragons would never understand. The Battle of the 1,000 Stars lasted exactly 47 minutes. When Kale Thresh arrived at the human fleet's hidden base in the Kepler Nebula, he carried more than just the location data for ancient weapon sites. He brought tactical information that would allow humanity to coordinate the largest simultaneous military action in galactic history. Admiral Chen listened as the prince outlined the Dragon Empire's complete fleet disposition through rapid sign language, with Elena's friend translating for the human officers who couldn't follow his gestures. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The Dragon King's most crucial intelligence was being delivered by his own son in a language the Empire considered primitive. 37 battle groups, Admiral Chen said after reviewing the data, spread across 17 systems. If we hit them all at once with the ancient weapons, we can disable their entire military capacity without destroying a single ship, Kale Thresh signed. But the timing must be perfect. If even one fleet escapes to warn the others, they will adapt their tactics. The human admirals studied the tactical display showing ancient weapon sites scattered across dozens of worlds. It'll require coordinating attacks across 12 light-years of space, using technology we barely understand, executed by crews who've had less than a month of training. Impossible? Asked Dr. Kim, who had been working frantically to decode ancient technical manuals. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. Probably, but humans specialize in impossible. The next week saw the largest covert military deployment in human history. Ships slipped through Dragon territory using mining routes and merchant corridors that Marcus Webb and other civilian captains had mapped over decades of trade. Ancient weapons were installed on everything from converted cargo haulers to the few remaining Earth Navy cruisers. But the technology was unlike anything human engineers had ever worked with. The weapons didn't destroy their targets. Instead, they generated cascading field effects that caused dragon power systems to shut down safely. Ships would lose propulsion and weapons, but their life support would remain intact. It's elegant, Dr. Kim explained during one of the final briefings. The ancients designed these specifically to neutralize threats without causing casualties. It's military technology built by people who valued all life. Kale Thresh had been assigned to Admiral Chen's flagship, where his knowledge of Dragon Fleet protocols would be most valuable. As they prepared for the operation, he found himself thinking about Elena constantly. The station's security forces had taken prisoners, but no word had come about their fate. The attack began at precisely Oro 300 Galactic Standard Time. Across 17 star systems, human forces emerged from hiding and activated ancient weapons that had lain dormant for millennia. The effect was immediate and devastating. Dragon warships simply stopped working. Massive dreadnoughts went dark and began drifting. Fighter squadrons fell silent. Orbital defense platforms ceased their vigilant scanning. But it was at the Dragon Empire's capital system where the most crucial moment occurred. The Dragon King himself was aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, when the ancient weapons activated. As the massive vessel's systems shut down, emergency lighting bathed the bridge in an eerie red glow. For the first time in his reign, the absolute ruler of 17-star systems was powerless. Admiral Chen's fleet materialized from the nebula, led by ships that should have been scrap metal, facing off against the most advanced military in the galaxy. The communication channel crackled to life with a transmission that shocked everyone who heard it. "Father," came Kale Thresh's voice, transmitted in perfect high draconian, "I would like to discuss terms." The Dragon King's roar of fury could be heard throughout the Eternal Dominion's bridge. But when he tried to order his fleet to attack, nothing happened. His ships were as silent as his son had been for 25 years. The negotiations took place in the same Golden Throne Hall where Kale Thresh had watched his father dominate the galaxy. But now the Dragon King sat in a simple chair while his son stood before him, flanked by Admiral Chen and other human representatives. "You have betrayed your own species," the Dragon King snarled. "For what? For aliens who will never accept you as one of their own?" Kale Thresh's hands moved in careful, precise gestures as Elena's replacement translator conveyed his words. "I have betrayed no one. I have simply chosen to stand with those who treated me as a person rather than as a disappointment." "And what happens now? You humans have won your victory. Will you do what you accuse us of doing? Will you become the new conquerors?" Admiral Chen stepped forward. "We're returning control of your ships. All of them. Your crews are unharmed, your weapons are intact. But the Empire's expansion ends here. Humanity and our allies will control our own territory, and any species that chooses to leave your empire will be given safe passage to neutral space." The Dragon King's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're giving us back our fleet?" "We're not conquerors," Kale Thresh signed. "We never were. We just wanted to be left alone to live our own lives." The treaty negotiations lasted for weeks. Humanity would retain control of their original colonies plus the ancient weapon sites, but they would not expand into dragon territory. Other subject species would be given the choice to leave the empire or stay. Trade would resume, but as equals, rather than as subjects and masters. The most difficult decision was what to do with Kale Thresh himself. The Dragon King made it clear that his son was no longer welcome in the Empire. Tradition demanded that a prince who betrayed his people should be exiled permanently. But human space also presented complications. Kale Thresh would always be viewed with suspicion by those who had suffered under dragon rule. The solution came from an unexpected source. "The ancient sites need guardians," Dr. Kim proposed, "people who understand both the technology and the responsibility that comes with it. Prince Kale Thresh has proven that he values life above conquest." So it was that the Dragon King's son became the first guardian of the ancient legacy, responsible for maintaining the weapon sites and ensuring they were never used for aggression. It was a position that would take him across the galaxy, but it also meant he would have a home base, a small research station built around the largest ancient site located in neutral space between human and dragon territory. Elena found him there 6 months later. She had spent the intervening time recovering from her injuries and dealing with the aftermath of the war. The dragon security forces had not been gentle with their prisoners, but they had also not executed them. Elena suspected that even then, some part of Kale Thresh's father had hoped his son might eventually return. "You came," Kale Thresh signed when he saw her approaching through the station's docking bay. His expression was carefully controlled, but Elena could see the hope and uncertainty in his golden eyes. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" she signed back. "You saved my species. The least I could do was come thank you in person." "And now?" Elena looked around the research station, with its mix of ancient artifacts and cutting-edge human and dragon technology. Scientists from a dozen different species worked alongside each other, united in their attempt to understand the legacy left by their galactic predecessors. Now, I think I'd like to stay if you'll have me. Someone needs to make sure you eat something besides military rations, and I've been thinking about learning xenoarchaeology. Kale Thresh's composure finally cracked, and Elena saw something she had never seen before. The dragon prince crying tears of relief and joy. "There's something else," Elena continued as she wiped away his tears. "Admiral Chen asked me to give you a message from the human government." She handed him a formal document with official seals and ribbons. As Kale Thresh read the high draconian text, his eyes widened. "Honorary citizenship," he signed in amazement. "Turns out saving 47 million people qualifies you for expedited immigration processing," Elena said with a grin. "Welcome to the human family, Kale. We're weird and stubborn and we argue about everything, but we never abandon our own." Years later, when historians studied the period known as the Great Liberation, they would focus on the military tactics, the ancient technology, and the complex diplomatic negotiations that reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy. But Elena knew that the real story was simpler and more profound. It was about a deaf prince who had spent his life being ignored and a waitress who took the time to learn sign language. It was about choosing to see the person rather than the disability, the individual rather than the species. It was about the radical idea that everyone deserves to be heard, even if they communicate in silence. The Dragon Empire still controlled vast territories, but it no longer ruled through fear alone. Dozens of species had chosen independence, creating a complex web of alliances and federations that balanced power across the galaxy. Trade flourished, exploration expanded, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy rang with the voices of many peoples rather than the commands of a single throne. And in a small research station, orbiting an unremarkable star, a former prince and a former waitress worked together to ensure that the weapons capable of toppling empires would remain in the hands of those who understood that true strength lay not in the power to conquer, but in the wisdom to protect. The Dragon King's quiet son had finally found his voice, and the galaxy was a better place because someone had taken the time to listen.